The old women warned her never to enter Blackthorn Forest after sunset. Instead, Evelyn Rowan walked deeper into the darkness. She wasn't chasing adventure, she was searching for moonshade flowers. Her younger brother, Owen, lay weak with fever in their tiny cottage. The village healer had quietly admitted there was only one herb strong enough to save him: moonshade. It bloomed only beneath the ancient oaks of Blackthorn Forest, a place everyone feared. "Avoid the king's wolves," the old women had whispered. "If you hear one crying, run." Evelyn tightened her cloak against the cold wind. "If I don't go," she murmured, "my brother won't live long enough to fear anything." The forest grew silent around her. Even the birds had stopped singing. Then she heard it, a low, painful whimper. Not fierce, not threatening, heartbroken. She followed the sound until she reached a moonlit clearing. There, beneath a massive oak tree, lay the largest black wolf she had ever seen. Its fur was soaked with blood. A silver spear pierced completely through its shoulder, pinning it against the frozen earth. Fresh boot prints surrounded the clearing. Someone hadn't hunted by chance. Someone had come prepared. The wolf lifted its head. Golden eyes met hers. She expected a growl. Instead, she saw exhaustion, as though the animal had already accepted death. Evelyn slowly knelt a few steps away. "If I pull that spear out, you might kill me." The wolf never moved. It simply lowered its head onto the snow. Trust. Or surrender. She wasn't sure which. Taking a deep breath, Evelyn snapped the wooden shaft near the wound. Blood immediately stained the snow. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "This will hurt." With both hands gripping the broken spear, she pulled. The blade slid free in one swift motion. The wolf cried out once, then collapsed. Blood poured over Evelyn's arms. Working quickly, she packed crushed moon herbs and wild yarrow into the wound before tearing her own cloak into strips for bandages. Hour after hour, she remained beside the injured wolf, changing dressings and keeping him warm through the freezing night. Slowly, his breathing steadied. As dawn painted the sky gold, Evelyn smiled with relief. "I hope someone is waiting for you." She reached out one last time. The great wolf gently pressed his nose against her hand. A silent thank you. Then, despite his injury, he rose to his feet. Without looking back, he disappeared among the towering pines. Evelyn watched until the last trace of black fur vanished into the forest. She gathered the moonshade flowers she had almost forgotten and hurried home, sure she would never see the mysterious wolf again. The following morning, 3 slow, deliberate knocks echoed against the door of her little cottage. The knocking came again. 3 slow, steady, deliberate knocks. Evelyn set down the steaming cup of moonshade tea she had just prepared for Owen. The medicine had finally broken his fever during the night. For the first time in days, he slept peacefully. She smiled with relief before walking to the front door. When she pulled it open, her breath caught. 12 royal guards stood in perfect formation outside the cottage. Their silver armor gleamed beneath the morning sun. Between them stood a tall man wearing a dark cloak embroidered with the royal crest. His left shoulder was wrapped in fresh white bandages, exactly where the black wolf had been wounded. Evelyn's eyes slowly lifted to his face, golden eyes, the same ones that had looked at her from the snowy clearing. The stranger inclined his head. "My name is Adrian Ashmore." Her heart skipped. The Alpha King. Before she could kneel, Adrian raised a hand. "Please. You've already done more than enough for me." From inside his cloak, he withdrew a broken silver spearhead. The blood had long since dried along its edge. "I believe this belongs to the woman who removed it." Evelyn stared at the weapon. It was the very spear she had pulled from the wolf's shoulder. "You," she whispered, "were the wolf." A faint smile touched Adrian's face. "I was." The villagers had begun gathering outside their homes. Children peeked from behind fences. Old women who had warned Evelyn away from the forest crossed themselves in disbelief. No one had ever seen the Alpha King visit an ordinary herbalist. Adrian turned so everyone could hear. This woman found a dying wolf in Blackthorn Forest. He looked back at Evelyn. She did not know he was her king. She did not ask which pack he belonged to. She simply chose compassion. Silence settled over the village. Then Adrian bowed his head. It was not the deep bow reserved for royalty. It was something quieter, more personal. "You saved my life." Evelyn shifted uncomfortably. "I only did what anyone should." "No," one elderly villager murmured. "Most of us would have run." Adrian nodded in agreement. "That is why I owe you a debt." Fear flickered through Evelyn, despite his kindness. She glanced toward the cottage where Owen still slept. "What happens now?" she asked softly. The Alpha King met her gaze. "I have come to repay what can never truly be repaid." He paused before continuing. "I would like you to accompany me to the Moon Palace. The kingdom deserves to know the courage of the woman who saved its king." Evelyn looked at the waiting guards, the watching villagers, the road stretching toward the distant capital. She had left home that week hoping only to save her brother. Now the Alpha King himself stood at her door. She had no way of knowing that accepting his invitation would place her at the center of a conspiracy powerful enough to shake the entire kingdom. The Moon Palace was unlike anything Evelyn had ever imagined. Marble pillars stretched toward painted ceilings. Crystal chandeliers scattered sunlight across polished floors. Every servant she passed lowered their head to the Alpha King. Every noble stared at the young herbalist walking beside him. Whispers followed her through every corridor. "That's her? The village girl? The one who touched the Alpha King's wolf?" Some looked curious, others looked offended. By the time Adrian entered the royal court, nearly every council member had already heard the story. He stepped before the throne. "This is Evelyn Rowan, the woman who saved my life." Before he could continue, Lord Cedric Voss rose from his seat. His expression was cold. "Your Majesty, with respect, a common herbalist cannot simply be welcomed into the royal court." Another noble nodded. "How do we know she didn't poison you first?" Perhaps the attack was staged. Perhaps she was part of the ambush. Murmurs of agreement spread through the chamber. Evelyn's cheeks burned. She had expected gratitude, not suspicion. Adrian's voice cut through the noise. "She spent an entire night keeping me alive. If she had wished me dead, I would not be standing here." The room fell quiet. As Adrian reached into his cloak and placed the broken silver spearhead on the council table, something caught Evelyn's attention. Cedric's face changed, only for a heartbeat. His confidence disappeared. His eyes widened ever so slightly. Then he quickly looked away. Most people would have missed it. Evelyn didn't. It was the expression of a man recognizing something he never expected to see again. That evening, Adrian assigned her comfortable guest chambers overlooking the palace gardens. "You'll remain here until the official ceremony tomorrow," he said. "If you need anything, the guards are outside." She thanked him and tried to rest. Sleep never came. Long after midnight, she heard the faint creak of her chamber door. Someone was inside. Evelyn stayed perfectly still beneath the blankets. A shadow crossed the room. Drawers opened quietly. Cupboards, her travel satchel. The intruder wasn't stealing. They were searching. The floorboard beneath the figure suddenly groaned. The shadow froze, then hurried toward the window. Evelyn leaped from the bed. "Who's there?" The figure vanished into the darkness before the guards reached the room. Captain Roland Gray searched every corner. "They're gone." As the guards examined the chamber, Evelyn noticed something glinting beneath the curtains. She bent down and picked it up. A heavy gold signet ring. Its face bore the crest of House Voss, Lord Cedric's family seal. She slowly closed her fingers around it. The noble who had argued loudest that she couldn't be trusted had somehow been inside her room. For the first time, Evelyn wondered if the spear that nearly killed the great black wolf had never been meant for a wolf at all. At dawn, Evelyn handed the signet ring to Captain Roland Gray. The seasoned commander turned it over in his hand. His expression darkened. "Are you certain this was found in your chamber?" Evelyn nodded. It was beneath the curtains after the intruder escaped. Roland slipped the ring into his pocket. "Tell no one. Not even His Majesty." She looked at him in surprise. "Why?" "Because if Lord Cedric truly is involved, we cannot risk warning him before we know the truth." Without another word, the captain left for the royal armory. By midday, Adrian summoned both Evelyn and Roland to a private council chamber. The captain placed the broken silver spearhead on the table. I had the weapon examined. He carefully turned the metal until a tiny engraving became visible beneath the handle. Only when sunlight struck it could the mark be seen. The royal crest. Adrian's face hardened. "That mark belongs to the palace armory." Roland nodded. "Only members of the royal council and high-ranking commanders have access to weapons forged there." Evelyn felt a chill run through her. "So whoever attacked you wasn't an enemy?" "No," Adrian answered quietly. "They were someone who knew exactly where I would be." Roland unfolded a hunting map. The assassination was planned weeks in advance. His Majesty often hunts alone in wolf form through Blackthorn Forest. The attacker expected the spear to kill him. And everyone would believe poachers were responsible. Adrian looked down at the blood-stained weapon. "If Evelyn hadn't found me, I would have died before sunrise." Silence filled the room. Then another guard burst through the doors. "Captain!" Roland turned sharply. "What is it?" "Lord Cedric Voss has disappeared." The room froze. He left the palace before dawn. His estate is empty. He took only a handful of loyal men. Adrian closed his eyes for a brief moment. "He knows we've discovered the truth." Roland's jaw tightened. "We've already dispatched riders. They'll find him." Evelyn wasn't so sure. A desperate man was often the most dangerous, especially one with wealth, influence, and nothing left to lose. As if her fears had summoned disaster, another messenger stumbled into the chamber moments later. He was covered in dust from hard riding. "Your Majesty." He struggled to catch his breath. "There has been another attack." Evelyn's heart pounded. "Where?" The messenger looked at her with sorrow. "Your village. They've taken your younger brother." A folded letter bearing Cedric's seal was placed into Adrian's hands. He broke it open. Inside were only 2 short lines. "Choose your throne, or choose the girl." The Alpha King slowly folded the letter. Then, without a word, he lifted the crown from his head. The royal council chamber erupted into chaos the moment Adrian set his crown on the table. "You cannot leave the capital," one counselor protested. "Neighboring packs are already watching our borders," another warned. "If the Alpha King abandons the throne now, they'll see weakness." Adrian remained calm. "My people are strongest when they know their king keeps his word." Lord Herrick slammed a hand against the table. "One village girl is not worth risking the kingdom." Adrian's golden eyes hardened. "She is not just a village girl. She is the reason your king is still alive." The chamber fell silent. Captain Roland stepped forward. "Our scouts tracked Cedric's men into the Iron Fang Mountains. They believe he's hiding in the abandoned silver mines." "The mines are a maze," another guard cautioned. "It could be a trap." "It is a trap," Adrian replied. "That changes nothing." He fastened his sword to his belt and turned toward the doors. Only Roland and 6 trusted royal wolves followed. No grand army, no royal banners. Just those willing to risk everything. Before mounting his horse, Adrian looked back once at the palace. The crown still rested on the council table, untouched. "For the first time," Roland said quietly, "you're riding without your crown." Adrian gave a faint smile. "I don't need a crown to do what's right." Far away, Deep inside the mountains, Evelyn struggled against the ropes, binding her wrists. She had insisted on searching for Owen herself, after hearing of the kidnapping. Instead, Cedric's men had captured her on the forest road before she reached the village. Now she and Owen were prisoners inside a damp cavern carved into the mountainside. Owen looked pale, but managed a weak smile. "I'm sorry." She shook her head immediately. "You've done nothing wrong." Footsteps echoed through the cave. Lord Cedric emerged from the shadows, carrying a lantern. His polished clothes were stained with dust, but his smile remained cold. "I had hoped you would stay quietly in the palace," he said. "It would have made this much easier." Evelyn lifted her chin. "You murdered my father, didn't you?" For a heartbeat, Cedric's smile faded. Then he laughed softly. "You ask better questions than your father ever did." He turned toward the cave entrance. Outside, distant wolf howls rolled across the mountains. Cedric's expression sharpened. "So, the Alpha King chose you after all." Evelyn closed her eyes briefly. She hadn't wanted Adrian to come. Not because she doubted his courage, but because she feared Cedric had prepared this trap long before any of them realized they were walking into it. Outside the abandoned silver mine, Adrian dismounted. The black entrance yawned before him like the mouth of a waiting beast. Sword in hand, he stepped into the darkness. The abandoned silver mine was colder than the mountain air outside. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling. Every sound echoed through the twisting tunnels. Captain Roland raised a torch. "This mine hasn't been worked in years." "It has now," Adrian replied quietly. Fresh footprints marked the dusty ground. Cedric wanted them to find him. The realization settled heavily over the small rescue party as they ventured deeper underground. At the end of the largest tunnel, a lantern flickered. Cedric stood waiting. Evelyn and Owen were tied to wooden support beams behind him. Several armed men emerged from the shadows, swords drawn. "You came," Cedric said with a mocking smile. "I was beginning to think the throne meant more to you than gratitude." Adrian never looked away from Evelyn. "Release them," Cedric laughed. "So direct. I suppose that's why you're loved." He turned to Evelyn. "Tell me, did your father ever speak about his years at the Royal Forge?" She frowned. "He said he made weapons for the kingdom." "He made something far more dangerous than weapons," Cedric replied. "He made records." Adrian's eyes narrowed. Cedric continued, almost proudly. "Your father discovered I had been stealing military funds for years. Gold meant for the kingdom was used to arm traitors loyal to me. He forged copies of every ledger and hid them where I could never find them." Evelyn's heart pounded. "My father's death wasn't an accident." Cedric's smile vanished. "I pushed the cart that crushed him." The words echoed through the mine. Owen lowered his head. Evelyn felt tears sting her eyes, but she refused to let Cedric see them fall. "You hunted us all these years," she whispered. "I hunted anyone who might know the truth," Cedric answered. "You were only a child. I assumed you remembered nothing. Then you saved the Alpha King. Suddenly, you became impossible to ignore." Cedric drew his sword. "So now, I end the last witnesses." He lunged. Steel clashed. As Adrian intercepted the strike, the mine exploded into battle. Roland and the Royal Wolves engaged Cedric's men, while Adrian fought through the chaos toward Evelyn. A support beam splintered beneath a heavy blow. Loose rocks rained from the ceiling. "Get them out!" Roland shouted. Adrian cut through Evelyn's ropes before freeing Owen. As the siblings hurried toward the tunnel, Cedric tried to escape through a narrow passage. Roland tackled him to the ground. The noble struggled wildly before royal guards pinned his arms behind his back. "It's over," Roland said. For the first time, fear replaced arrogance in Cedric's eyes. Days later, hidden ledgers were recovered from an old forge, exactly where Thomas Rowan had concealed them. The evidence proved every one of Cedric's crimes. At last, the truth that had been buried with Evelyn's father rose into the light. 3 months later, the moon court filled with people from every corner of the kingdom. Nobles stood beside blacksmiths. Soldiers shared benches with farmers. For the first time in living memory, the palace doors had been opened to everyone. At the center of the great hall stood Evelyn. She wore a simple blue gown instead of royal silk. She had insisted nothing about her should outshine the reason everyone had gathered. At the far end of the hall, Lord Cedric Voss was led away in chains, after receiving judgment for treason, murder, and conspiracy against the crown. Justice had finally been served. When the chamber grew quiet, Adrian stepped forward. He wasn't carrying a jeweled scepter. Instead, he held a worn leather pouch. Its stitching was uneven, and the leather had faded with age. Evelyn recognized it instantly. The pouch that had once held the herbs she packed into the wound of a dying wolf. Adrian held it carefully, as though it were the kingdom's greatest treasure. "When I first came to your cottage," he said, his voice carrying through the hall, "I believed I owed you a life." He looked at Evelyn with a warm smile. "I was wrong." A ripple of curiosity passed through the crowd. "You did not simply save me. You saved every family that would have suffered under a traitor's rule. You saved the truth your father died protecting. And you reminded a king that compassion is stronger than fear." He stepped down from the dais until he stood before her. Without hesitation, Adrian lowered himself onto one knee. Gasps echoed through the court. An alpha king had never knelt before a commoner. But Adrian did not kneel to honor her station. He knelt to honor her character. "You saw a wounded wolf," he said softly. "You never asked if he wore a crown. You simply chose kindness." His eyes never left hers. "I searched my whole life for someone who could see the man before the title." He gently took her hand. "If you'll allow it, I would like to spend the rest of my life proving you chose the right wolf to save." Tears shimmered in Evelyn's eyes. She laughed through them, remembering that cold night beneath the ancient oak. "I almost walked away," she admitted. Adrian's smile widened. "But you didn't. And every morning since, I've thanked fate for your courage." The court erupted into applause. Not because a king had found the woman he loved, but because everyone had witnessed something rarer. A ruler humble enough to bow before the person who had changed his life. Evelyn squeezed Adrian's hand. This time, she wasn't accepting a debt. She was accepting a future. Together. 5 years later, people still traveled for days to visit the little stone cottage at the edge of Blackthorn Forest. It looked much as it always had. Wildflowers bloomed beneath the windows. Herbs dried from wooden beams. The only difference was that the cottage had grown. Several small buildings now surrounded it, forming the Royal Healing Sanctuary, where injured wolves, travelers, and villagers received care without question. Evelyn had refused every suggestion to tear down her old home. "This is where everything began," she would always say. "If we forget humble beginnings, we'll forget why we built any of this." Inside the sanctuary, healers worked side by side with royal physicians. No one asked whether a patient was rich or poor, only what they needed. Among the busiest helpers was Owen. The pale, feverish boy Evelyn had once feared losing had become a strong young herbalist. He often smiled whenever visitors asked how he had learned so much. "My sister saved my life twice," he would answer, "once with moonshade, and once by teaching me that kindness is never wasted." Adrian visited the sanctuary whenever his duties allowed. Though he remained the Alpha King, he never expected special treatment. He carried firewood, repaired fences, and cleaned animal stalls alongside everyone else. More than once, new volunteers mistook him for an ordinary worker. He never corrected them unless they asked. One crisp autumn afternoon, a young wolf arrived with an injured leg. The frightened animal bared its teeth as the healers approached. Evelyn knelt a safe distance away. "I know you're afraid," she said gently, "but fear doesn't make you our enemy." Slowly, the wolf relaxed. Adrian watched with a smile. "You spoke to me exactly like that," he said. She laughed. "You were less cooperative. I was bleeding. You were stubborn. I still am." Their laughter echoed across the courtyard, drawing smiles from everyone nearby. And the sanctuary became known throughout the kingdom as a place where no one was turned away. Soon, Adrian issued a royal decree that changed the law forever. No injured wolf, whether royal, common, or wild, could be hunted, abandoned, or denied aid. Those who violated the decree would answer to the crown itself. Many called it the Forest Decree. Evelyn simply called it common decency. As winter approached, children gathered around the old fireplace inside the cottage. Their eyes wandered to the rusted silver spear hanging above the mantel. One little boy pointed at it. "Your Majesty, why do you keep that old spear?" Evelyn smiled. She had answered that question many times, yet every answer mattered. She stepped toward the fireplace, her eyes resting on the weathered weapon that had changed all their lives. The children gathered closer to the fire. Its warm glow danced across the old silver spear hanging above the mantel. Time had dulled the metal. Rust covered much of its blade, yet no one in the kingdom ever suggested replacing it. A little girl looked up at Evelyn. "Why do you keep something that almost took the king's life?" Evelyn smiled softly. Because that question deserved more than a simple answer. She gently lifted the spear from its hooks. Holding it across her palms, she said, "Because evil sometimes arrives carrying a weapon." The children listened without moving. But kindness decides how the story ends. The room grew quiet. One of the boys frowned thoughtfully. "So, if you had been afraid that night, King Adrian would have died?" Evelyn nodded. "And much more than that." She glanced toward the open doorway. Outside, wolves rested peacefully beneath the trees, while travelers shared meals with villagers. Years earlier, such a sight would have been impossible. Now, it was simply life. Adrian stepped into the cottage, carrying fresh bread from the village bakery. The children rushed to greet him. "Your Majesty," he laughed. "I've told you before. Here, I'm just Adrian." The children accepted the bread before one asked the question. Every visitor eventually did. "Is it true you were the wolf she saved?" He looked at Evelyn, with the same gentle smile he had worn the morning he first knocked on her door. "It's true, and she never knew I was a king." He paused. "I've always believed that was the greatest gift she gave me." The children looked confused. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because," Adrian answered. "For one night, I wasn't treated like a crown. I was treated like someone whose life mattered." Outside the cottage, the royal healing house welcomed another line of patients. Above its entrance, carved into white stone, were the words Adrian had chosen years before. "A crown may command loyalty, but compassion is what earns it." Travelers often stopped to read the inscription before entering. Many left believing they had visited a hospital. Most departed realizing they had experienced something much greater. They had seen what a kingdom could become when kindness was valued above fear. People remembered the night an ordinary herbalist pulled a spear from a dying wolf, but they remembered the morning after even more. The morning an alpha king knocked on a humble cottage door believing he had come to repay a single life. Instead, he found the woman whose compassion healed his kingdom, restored justice, and reminded every generation that true greatness begins with the courage to help someone who can offer nothing in return.